In 1945, Britain stood on the winning side of history. The bombs had stopped falling. The enemy had surrendered. The Union Jack still flew over a quarter of the planet. But something was wrong, because behind the victory parades, behind the speeches, behind the illusion of triumph, Britain was already finished. Not defeated, not invaded, not conquered, bankrupted, and almost no one noticed. That is how empires actually die. Not loudly, quietly. Now here's the part they don't teach you. World War II did not end the British Empire on the battlefield. It ended it on paper. And the bill was written in Washington. Pause for a second and think about this. Before the war, Britain wasn't just powerful. Britain was the system. The British pound was global money. London was the financial heart of the world. British ships carried global trade. British banks financed governments. British insurance underwrote empires. If you wanted power, you went through Britain. Then came the war. And war doesn't just kill soldiers. It devours money. Faster than fire. Faster than bombs. Every plane Britain built drained gold. Every ship burned reserves. Every day of fighting pushed the empire deeper into a hole it could not see. And by 1940, Britain was running out of time. And worse, it was running out of cash. This is where the story turns. Because Britain didn't collapse alone. It reached out for help across the Atlantic to a country that hadn't yet been bombed, hadn't yet been exhausted, hadn't yet paid the price of war. The United States, at first, it looked generous. America would supply Britain with food, oil, weapons, ships, planes. The program had a friendly name, Lend-Lease. It sounded harmless, temporary, almost charitable. But nothing in global finance is ever free. And this is where the trap quietly closed. Because while Britain was fighting for survival, America was preparing for dominance. Factories in the US ran day and night. American industry exploded. American gold reserves surged. The dollar grew stronger while the pound bled. Britain wasn't just borrowing weapons. It was borrowing time. And time always charges interest. By the time the war ended, Britain had won. But his gold was gone. Its reserves were empty. Its economy was shattered. Its empire was no longer affordable. And then came the moment that sealed everything. 1946. Britain went back to the United States. Not as an equal, not as an empire. As a debtor, what followed was called a loan. But in reality, it was a transfer of power. The Anglo-American loan. Billions of dollars. But the money wasn't the real cost. The conditions were, Britain was forced to end its imperial trade system. Forced to open its markets. Forced to abandon the economic protections that had kept its empire alive. And most importantly, forced to accept the dollar. The pound, once the world's reserve currency was finished, just like that. No explosion. No invasion. No surrender ceremony. Just signatures. And here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. Britain didn't fall because it lost the war. It fell because it won a war it couldn't afford. Suddenly, colonies weren't assets anymore. They were expenses. Troops cost money. Administration cost money. Control cost money. And Britain didn't have money. So one by one, the empire dissolved. India, Africa, the Middle East. Not taken by force. Released by debt. History books call it decolonization. Finance calls it something else. Liquidation. And while Britain was shrinking, America was rising. The US didn't need colonies. It had something better. Debt. Institutions. Currency control. The IMF. The World Bank. The dollar. This was empire without flags. Influence without occupation. Power without responsibility. The British Empire ruled through ships and soldiers. The American Empire ruled through balance sheets. And almost no one noticed the switch because it didn't look like conquest, it looked like recovery. But here's the darkest truth. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't bad luck. This was the moment the modern financial world was designed. A world where wars don't destroy winners. Debt does. A world where power doesn't shift through violence. It shifts through obligation. Britain signed away its dominance to survive one more year. And it worked. Britain survived. But the empire didn't. Now ask yourself something. If debt ended the largest empire in human history, what do you think it does to countries today? Because debt doesn't disappear, it doesn't fade. It gets restructured, rolled over, hidden, or quietly transferred. This wasn't the first empire destroyed by a bill, and it won't be the last, because the weapon has changed. And most people are still looking for tanks, while the real war is happening in spreadsheets. And the scariest part? The country that mastered this system is now buried under its own debt, which raises a question far more dangerous than history. What happens when the empire that replaced Britain faces a bill it can't pay? That story doesn't end here. It continues in silence. If this made your mind itch, drop a comment and subscribe.